What is up, ICCCon? Mike the Mic Guy here. We are here on the ECPCTV podcast stage, and I am joined by, of course, Matt of ECPCTV Studios, and two very special guests. I have Lauren Vogt and John Goodson. Both have worked extensively behind the scenes of a lot of shows and movies you have seen over the years, and we're going to find out a lot about what they do. So please, describe to me what you guys do for people that don't know.
Somebody asked me to describe what I do in the worst possible way, and I said, I take large pieces of material and make them into small pieces of material.
That's true. Very true.
Yeah, that's the worst possible description. Yeah.
I like that description, though. It's a good one.
I was negotiating for a contract with Miramax once. And they were like, well, you know, what makes you special? What do you do? And Henry Selick had wanted me to be on this team. And so we were talking about this and that and everything. And, of course, the stars are the animators. But we make what they move.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, you guys think of it, write the story, but I make it happen.
Yeah.
I make it real. I make it so you can move it.
Yeah.
So I did get the contract. And I was real cocky that day.
Oh,
I was all pumped up, and I'm like, I'm really going to. So it worked for me, that description.
That's good. That's a good description.
I got an off because reading about your past and what you do in movies and everything. Did you play with toys a lot as kids, and did that contribute to how you created something and then you got to play it on the movies and stuff like that?
All of that. I mean, it's funny because I remember we were doing Mission Impossible, the first of those films. And John Knoll wanted to model a helicopter so that he could show the animators how a helicopter moves. Because a lot of those guys didn't play with helicopter toys when they were little. Because if you played with them, you actually paid attention to how it worked. And I think all of that stuff really plays into it. And I was really fascinated with World War II hardware, ships, submarines, tanks, all that stuff. You learn a lot just by building the models.
Yeah.
And it gives you some understanding of how things are put together and kind of what the level of detail is. And so all of those things contribute in the end. I mean, everything, your whole life experience goes into it, but that stuff in particular, especially for things like Star Wars, where you're trying to make technology that isn't real look convincing, all that stuff plays into it big time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. And you worked on Battleship, right?
I work on the USS Iowa. Yeah.
Okay.
Volunteer, yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's kind of play into it too, right?
That ship is my salvation from a lot of different standpoints. I've been working there for 12 years as a volunteer, and it was the antidote to computer graphics.
Okay.
Because computer graphics was really frustrating, and those computers don't want to do what you're asking them to do.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of like, I don't understand what's happening, and that's but I have to get this done in the next 3 hours because it has to happen. And it was so stressful. And I go to the Battleship, it's like, let's move this heavy thing from here to over there. I'm like, I understand that. This is very clear. So, yeah, the Battleship. But I was teaching a modeling class for LucasArts, I think, building models and talking about kit bashing. And I said, the Iowa was up in the Bay Area at that point. I said, you guys need to come over to the Battleship and visit it. This is as close as you'll ever get to being on a Star Destroyer. This is the real deal. And you can see how the technology is integrated into the human spaces and the scale of the guns and all of those things. And
wow.
all of that plays into it big time. We were doing one of the Avengers movies, and we had the helicarrier, and it got hit, and it exposed part of one of the insides of one of the guns. And they were like, what does this look like? I'm like, I can tell you all about what it's like, and so we built it kind of based on that description.
That's awesome.
But yeah, all that, everything you do like that. I love going to back when they had them, the Reno air races. And that was great for going down into the pits where all the aircraft are, and that was a great place for photo reference. And a lot of the pictures I took at Reno, I used as paint on the Transformers films, and some on Star Wars too. So yeah, everything you do like that, it kind of funnels in and kind of helps you inform what you're doing.
Yeah, wow. That's awesome. That's really cool. All right, I'm sure you get this question a lot. Spaceballs.
Spaceballs.
Dancing alien. How did you make that happen?
Shall I tell the story?
Please do. Please do.
I was under the bar, puppeteering him for that, and we had a monitor. So I had like laying on a, one of those things you roll under a car to work on. They had one of those like, under those, and there was another guy who I can't remember the other, Dave Johnson. But so we were under there animating, and then between times we didn't want to get all untangled and get out of there. And there was a monitor down there for us to see, what we were doing. And so John Candy and somebody else, they were flirting around with the waitress, the actress playing the waitress, so hard. And they didn't know we were like right under there, like. So finally, the Dave goes, "Good one," like the voice under the. That was one goofy thing, and so that was the. I just told this story, the MF and yeah. Okay, so first I'll tell that I got the job because Charlie Bailey let me have a chance, and I was doing more painting and foam work and kind of the basic support stuff for everybody. But I thought, I know I can sculpt this, and so he gave me the chance. He said, okay, you can sculpt it after all your chores are done. I felt like I'm Cinderella, And so I did it, and I stayed up late at night, and my theater friend helped me with how to hold the cane and the hat and everything. And so we packed it up because, of course, I went to the last possible moment. And Charlie said, look, if you put that in a box, carefully packed, I'll take it in the morning to Mel Brooks. And so it was like, wow, he trusts me that much that he's not even going to look at it. He's just going to take it and open it in front of Mel Brooks, which I didn't realize at the time. Looking back on it later, I was like, wow. So we're all waiting on tenterhooks there because Howie Weed and Jonathan Horton had sculpted the other maquettes. And so we're waiting. Do we get the job? Do we get the job? Charlie calls and he says, we got the job. We're like, oh, cool. Which one did he pick? He goes, he picked the one with the hat. So Howie's like, mine had a hat. And I was like, well, mine had a hat too. So it was still like, oh, who's it? So when they opened a box and it was mine, I was so thrilled. Oh, yeah. And then I got permission to sculpt it, and do the whole, because I already did the foam and the paint and everything. And then actually to go on set and puppeteer it on set was a huge thrill. And then I knew I had to go on set, and I knew that there was all the unions with the LA set stuff, and I knew you couldn't just move a light or move anything, and you had to watch really carefully, walking over all the wires and stuff. And years later, I'm switching the subject. I'm jumping. A little side story, where we were working in at Leica in Oregon on Coraline. And they did team building exercises and stuff. So they took us to a gun range so we could shoot the thing. And the one guy was, you've done this before? I said, no. Oh, you're a natural. And so I thought he was joking, but I did do really well. I kept that, like, the target behind my desk for a long time, like the headshot. But while we were there, a woman was teaching us about safety, and she had a hook for a hand. So it was like, ooh, you're going to really pay attention to her. But at the end, she said, you guys were so conscious and you're really careful, and this is an amazing group. And it was like, I wonder if it's because we all have training on set to step over the wires, to do around this, to be so aware of your surroundings. So that was my little conclusion, that we're extra skilled bunch. But I am going to tell this one other little part.
Yes.
So back to the going on set, and we had a set guy did the electrics and all that stuff for us at ILM, Joe Fulmer, and he was really grouchy, big, coffee drinking, cigar guy, and so I watched what he called all the lights and everything. So I was down there, and Mel Brooks wanted something changed, and I needed a work light. So I said, excuse me, sir, to the right guy I watched, could you move this MF and Tweenie over here? I need a work light. And he kind of chuckled and moved the light over, and then Eben Stromquist, who's on our team, came over and he goes, did you just call that an MF and Tweenie? And I said, I did. I watched Joe, that's the right name for it, I'm staying. And he said, MF and his motherfucking. So I had so casually and politely asked for this. Would you move this MF and Tweenie over here? So I was devastated. I was like, oh no, we have to, my cover is blown, but it is kind of funny looking back on it.
Yeah, you blended right in.
Yeah, that's it.
Exactly. That's what they referred to it. That's what it's called.
Do you still have the alien with the hat? Do you own that, or did
no,
you have to?
no, that was
Part-
all the stuff you did for them was theirs.
Okay.
I've got some cool old Polaroids I had found though of on the way how I was doing it. So and because this all is new to me, this wanting to talk to the people that made it, wanting to talk to me is completely new. So I went with the Bunta Eve. I don't know what it was. Very recent in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so many people were telling me stories about that Spaceballs guy and how much that meant to them and stuff. And I look at it now and it's like so hokey how he's like kicking because we had the bouncer.
Yep.
We had the bouncer and the kicker. And it's like, but
Not only that, the little door he walks through when his performance ends, all that was like iconic and classic. Yeah.
It is. It's
so
amazing.
it was a really a big moment in my career, that whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was that something planned? Like, was that in the script to have that, or was that something random that like Mel Brooks was like, I need something like off the cuff funny for the alien part?
Well, I'm sure it was all well thought out on the top. I just, that was kind of the thing with us. It wasn't all, Stars and Stripes, Star Wars. It was like, here, feed city, paint this, figure out how to paint this, and that was so fun. And getting to figure out how to do crackle effect and all that cool stuff. But it wasn't epic at that point.
Yeah.
It was a good job, really good job, and really great people we got to work with.
Wow, that's cool. That's really cool. I'm going to go back to you for a minute. So I am a big Back to the Future fan. What did you do on Back to the Future? I see you did modeling of some type?
Yeah, it's funny because the first feature I worked on at ILM was Ghostbusters 2, and the next one was Back to the Future 2. And Steve Golly, we built prototypes for some stuff. One of the prototypes for the police vehicle.
Okay.
There were various different versions of the Gray's Almanac that were electronic.
Really?
So 3 of those, some of the flying cars from the freeway sequence.
Awesome.
We did Biff's Hotel. We built the high school. We built the bombed out version of it, and they filmed that, but then it didn't wind up in the film. But I think you can see it in the deleted scenes.
Yeah.
But Back to the Future 2 was a pretty long job, and then it was funny on 3. I think I moved over to Star Trek 6, but I knew Steve needed a small DeLorean for the shot of the car going over the bridge over the Eastwood Ravine.
Yeah.
And so there was an RC DeLorean you could get back then, so I bought it, and I totally tricked it out as the Back to the Future 3 car. And I went to Steve, and I wasn't on a show, and I said, I got something I think you need. And he was like, what is it? And I showed it to him. I go, I'll sell it to you for $1,500. So he bought it, and that's the one that goes over the ravine.
That's awesome.
So,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
But 3, I wish I was on 3. The trains were so cool.
Oh, yeah.
They were amazing. And
Yeah,
we had
all the
2 of
models.
those. And they ran them off the cliff. They ran the first one off the cliff, and they got the shot. We had the other one, and they just were like, well, let's run it off just to see what we get. And they destroyed both of them, but they were the coolest things before they were destroyed.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of pictures of those, and it looks like very intricate models. And I mean, of course, both of you working, you know how intricate, small you can get with all these models, and
Yeah.
it's always amazed me how realistic they look. With the camera angles, you can see that they're full size.
Well, that scale, they were like quarter scale, and those trains were metal.
Yeah,
So when it went off that cliff, that was over Novato. That was like a 65-foot drop.
yeah,
There's a lot of kinetic energy at the bottom of
Oh,
that,
yeah.
all that metal hitting, so it looks very real.
it did. It looked really good too. It was great for a final shot, I guess.
Yeah. So
Yeah, when it comes to Back to the Future, there's so many details. But I'm guessing, working mostly with sci-fi stuff, you have to pay attention to those details and like almost create something that someone's never ever seen. Like you said, you tricked out the DeLorean, sold it to him for $1,500. There was probably something on there. Like when you're thinking sci-fi, you got to go kind of into the future of kind of like what you want to see. Like how much of that kind of comes into play?
that's an interesting thing because sci-fi, there's a lot of latitude there. I mean, you usually get art direction, but you're not generating something that's real. And it's interesting. I just did a project where we had to build a hill, and it's for a night shot miniature hill. And because it's real and everybody knows what a real hill looks like, that's a different kind of challenge because you've actually got to hit the marks that make it convincing as a real thing. So when you're building something like, an A-26 Invader World War II bomber, that you have to build exactly that way. You're building something for Star Wars, there's a certain amount of latitude to interpret, you just have to make it look cool and fit the criteria of the film, but they're different kinds of things. Having to do something that's real world can be more challenging than doing the fantasy stuff.
True.
When I got to do a lot of painting of these models, and so there was my title, Aging Queen, which at that time, wasn't bad. Now I don't know if I'd like it so well, but there was a see, and I don't know all this lingo because I would get the thing and paint it, but I didn't get what it was. So it was on a planet that was all water, and there was a big like mushroom thing that came out, and
Yeah, Camino.
Camino, there you go. And so we were painting that, and it was an ocean planet and all this stuff. So it was like, oh, cool, I get to do really scale moss on here. And so there was interpretation that the art director would come by, oh, hey, I like that. And you'd be like, ha. And so it was really cool that way. And we had interference paint that we did, and it was pink one way and green the other way. And so it really looked cool to your eye. But then in the dark, in the rain, in the, storming, none of that showed. So it was like, man, we did all that work, that cool work, and you can't see it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff you could see, what we figured out. So it was really, those were the good days.
Yeah.
I loved Theed City. That was so fun. That was so beautiful. Now, in some place there was a waterfall. Was it Theed City?
Mm-hmm.
So, Lauren Peterson was telling somebody about how that was salt pouring down.
Really?
Get out of town.
Yeah, is that,
Crazy.
you haven't heard that one?
No, I haven't heard that, but
No.
that it doesn't shock me. Those
Yeah.
kind of details, I guess, for the camera work, I guess, to
Yeah.
catch the right,
Yeah,
like
all the scale stuff.
realism.
And then, speaking of scale, do I have time to tell a story?
You have
Yeah.
all the time. in the world.
Okay, so
We're not kicking you.
this
out.
was at the end of Pirates, one or two, I can't remember. And we had the Black Pearl, and we had to build it really big because water doesn't change scale. So you remember when you used to watch like Diver Dan or something like that, and it would be you're looking out of the peephole of the submarine, and the water's like huge
Yeah.
because you can't change the scale of water.
Yeah.
So we had to make this boat big enough that the water would look real. So they had it out in the parking lot thing that they used to put Duvetine and make a big water thing, and it was going to be a night shoot. So the huge balloon that represented the moon, it was so cool. And then people's families got to be there because it's going to be one of the last like practical effect things, and it was the storm. So we were all out there chitter chat because it was no sound, whatever. And they had the gigantic fan that would blow the water up to be the storm, and they had a dump thing that made the waves. So it'd be like, all right, here we go, and everything would like start to wind up, and it felt like a carnival, the noise of the Ferris wheel and the this and the roar of the crowd, and so they, all the cues and dump the water, and then the big wave, and then the wind pushing, and it was so cool and so fascinating with that moonlight and the noise and watching it, and then all of a sudden these giant men would step into this thing and destroy the illusion, but it was just a really wonderful experience. And that Black Pearl went on tour of a bunch of museums around the country at one point.
Wow.
So we had all the little rope and all the little pulleys and a lot of detail.
I couldn't figure out why we didn't die that night because we're all standing outside the water tank, and there are power lines going all over the place, for the setup. And when they did the storm thing, suddenly there was about a foot of water that we're all standing in, and there are electric lines in there, and for some reason we didn't die. But yeah, I remember thinking, holy shit. I was like,
I'm a little concerned about that too. But that's cool that they used all practical effects, to do all that. You'd think a lot of that's just CGI. I'm sure they just added CGI in,
they had an 18,000 watt lightning generator. They had the 16,000 watt moon that was a balloon.
Yeah.
Then they had rain bars, they had Ritter fans, they had smoke generators, they had 2 5,000-gallon dump tanks. They had this thing called a water hammer. It looked like a big arm with a 55-gallon drum on the end of it that just beat the water. And they had these big rollers that were eccentric, and they would just offset roll, and it would create waves. So they'd fire all that stuff up, and go, and yeah, it was really something.
That's awesome.
I heard that they're kind of bringing practical effects into the business back because it's more cost affordable now. Is that true?
I like hearing that story, but
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well, just you get your information where you get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But hearing it, CGI is becoming more expensive now because of the many different places to make it as real as it looks now. So when you go to studios like, is it A23, A24? It does like A24 that is more of the affordable movies, because they bring in new directors and stuff like that. Can't really afford the CGI stuff. So like studios like that are going back to the old effects to bring in that kind of stuff because it's more affordable.
Well, I hope that's true. It's kind of funny. Alien Romulus, I can't think of his name. He was Ian Hunter, I think, went to Ireland and started to put together a model shop over there, and they built the miniature ships for Alien Romulus, which I was really encouraged to hear that. I was unfortunate he couldn't do it with New Deal, which was his company here in the States. But, it's interesting because I think we have a generation of filmmakers that they had the luxury of working just in computer graphics, and you don't have to be very decisive. I mean, it's good if you are, but, we don't have a third act, and the movie's coming out in 2 months. Well, we'll do something. And it's just armies of people on computers making this stuff happen. And, in the old days, you had to build sets. You had to plan. On this day, we're on this set, this costume, all those things. And with digital, it's like, we'll just put a blue screen over there and we'll deal with it later.
Yeah.
And so I think we've had a generation of filmmakers that didn't have to be that decisive. And now with things like the video walls, you actually have to plan because those assets have to be generated, rendered, so that you can have them on the video. And so it's causing people are having to be more, they're having to be more dedicated in terms of planning and sticking with those ideas and going with it as opposed to the free form. And so going back to more practical stuff, I think it does the same thing. You have to decide what you want, and you're trying to make your money count, you do it, and it can be faster. There are times when there are things, I remember there was on one of the Star Trek movies, they were shooting the bird of prey trying to go in the water, and they shot it something like 130 times or something like that. It was like the most takes ILM ever shot of anything, and it never worked.
Wow.
Bird of Prey in 4? Star Trek 4?
It was in 4 when it goes in the water by the Golden Gate Bridge.
Look at
They
that.
wound up doing a motion control.
My
shot.
nerd card is still there, bro. 'Cause as soon as you said Bird of Prey hit the water, I'm like, that's 4. That's Voyage Home.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just want to call it out.
That's awesome.
I painted the whale on that, and it was
Oh.
Really?
seriously toxic paint.
Wow.
So I had to have, I had to wear like a bunny suit and all sorts of forced air from outside and, tangled with that, and then nobody else in the booth. And then the girl that was going to do it, because I had just come off Howard the Duck, which was really exhausting. And they're like, we really need you to come in. I'm like, I can't even. But so I came in anyway, and it was, the shop was, nobody was there. It was just me trying to paint this whale. And whales have a particular sloughing off of their skin that's like wrinkles, like peely, like stuff. And Peter Benchley had to come in and approve of my effect on the wrinkles and the sloughing and everything. So
That's awesome.
but
Y'all are my heroes.
Yeah.
and it was really super toxic. So it'd take like half an hour to get in the suit to go and do the thing, and paint, and it was getting it was like a nightmare. The clogging, the whole thing. This urethane paint was so, and then though it was much easier to do the barnacles. But I remember, speaking of planning, I had to plan when I was going to the bathroom because I would have to dismantle for half an hour to get out of all the gizmo to get to the bathroom in time. So, yeah, that was pretty cool. And then you were telling earlier about how those whales then were so beautiful, and I did not get a credit on that. And
Really?
neither did Richard Miller, who sculpted the whale.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a cool thing. I took my brother, I'm all proud, to the premiere. I'm like, hey. And it's like, all the names. And he's like, I don't think your name's on there. And it's like, and it wasn't, because you had to have a certain amount of hours or something they made with the union, some deal. So it was a big uproar for Richard.
Yeah.
Because he sculpted the thing. But so we had them in a case. And you can tell that part better because we had to put so much plasticizer in this urethane to get it to be all smooth, and that's what allowed me also to skim across it was some sandpaper and stuff and get the perfect wrinkle effect. But yours,
Yeah, it was a material that Smooth On made called PMC 724, I think.
he knows all the stuff.
And it was, and what they were doing, the whale had an internal core that was fiberglass and it had the mechanism. On the outside of that, they had a layer of the material. They took this, it was urethane elastomer, so it's like a silicone kind of. They mixed microballoons into it, little tiny glass spheres, and it made it a more rigid version of that. And so that was the inner core. Then they used regular Smooth On, which is pretty much just like silicone, as a secondary layer, and then the outer skin, and it was really thick back towards the tail. They took this plasticizing agent and they plasticized it to 120% of what's recommended. And the reason they did is because when the tail would move, without the plasticizer, it would wrinkle.
A wrinkle.
Oh my
And
gosh.
if you watch Jaws 3,
Yeah.
there's a part where the shark's got it sticking into one of the tunnels and the tail's moving around. It's this latex and foam piece of crap that got all these wrinkles in it. So this did exactly the opposite of what that did. And it worked really, really well. But the net result of that was that this plasticizing agent was coming out of the material constantly. And so I took half of a tail that was unpainted and I threw it on a workbench and it landed on a piece of 1/4-inch acrylic. And a couple days later, I went over there and it had eaten halfway through the acrylic. And
Toxic.
then they put one of them in a case in Doug Norby's office, and he was president of Lucasfilm, and it attacked the inside of the case. So the case it looked like a freezer that needed to be defrosted. The acrylic was coming apart on the inside of it. And eventually that PMC 724 just kind of turns back into a super
Pudding.
toxic goo.
Ooh.
Yeah. So like the speeder bike models had it for all the hoses and stuff, and they all turned to goo. And in Raiders, Paul Houston made a puppet of Indiana Jones, and he's supposed to ride the periscope. That's how he gets on the German U-boat and he makes it all the way to the island because he hangs onto the periscope because they didn't drive around with the periscopes up. That's not how that worked, but that was the way they kind of explained it. But that puppet, completely gone. All that's left is the wire armature for it, but that stuff really unstable.
But we use that for a lot of the hands in Nightmare Before Christmas. So all those puppets you see just a short time later, it's just the wire and little blue gob drips, or you know.
Man.
It's pretty gross.
So that was kind of work for a while restoring those, so that was good, but it was shocking because I
Yeah.
knew them as little friends, and then there they are. Oh my God!
Yeah, they're falling apart. Be concerned too. Well, I wish we could keep talking because we could talk for hours with you two. I have probably a dozen more questions. I'm
gosh.
sure you
Yeah,
do too.
oh, yeah.
I mean, but unfortunately, we are running out of time. And you
Okay.
two will be at, I believe, the Bunta Eve party
Yep.
tonight,
Yep.
8 p.m., $10 at the door, and then you have autographs going on
Yep.
as well.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, if you're here, go to that show tonight, 8 p.m. It's going to be awesome. Meet them, ask them all the questions I didn't get to ask them. But anyways, y'all come on down to ICCCon. We got one more day left. I'll see y'all.